everybody, and welcome to Reigniting Small Business. I'm Laura Richards, and I'm here with Patrick Lee today. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing well.
So we're talking today about how to prepare and protect your business from a ransomware attack. And before we get too much into the subject, I think we need to acknowledge how we got to this subject matter, which is that Cyberattack has been all over the news this month. Back way in the beginning of the month, Colonial Pipeline Company, which is a critical U.S. pipeline that operates a 5,500 mile pipeline that delivers 45% of our gasoline and jet fuel to the U.S., had a major ransomware attack.
Yeah, Colonial's number 4 pipeline was hit with ransomware in the first week of May. And this was a huge deal. And I think a lot of folks, me included, woke up to a bunch of headlines about gas shortage and all this sort of stuff, but had no idea initially, well, what's going on? Why is this happening? And you had to do a little bit of digging to realize, oh, wait, that whole cyber attack that we read about is actually what's causing this to happen. Colonial's number 4 is a critical pipeline that runs from refineries on the U.S. Gulf Coast to terminals as far north as New York. It was shut down until they could bring it back under manual control. So that temporarily halted all pipeline operations.
Yeah, and I guess one of the big issues with it is it compromised about 100 gigabytes of data that they took hostage. And Colonial didn't want something really devastating to happen, which was one of the reasons why they took it off to manual. So the hackers locked down on this data, some computers and servers, and threatened to leak the data if they didn't pay the ransom, which, by the way, they did pay. And this shady group of hackers was perceived to be dark side, and then ultimately the FBI confirmed it was dark side. And there's been reported by Reuters that the ransom demands were anywhere from $200,000 to $2 million. So kind of crazy that, in a way, that demand seems somewhat low.
It seems silly.
Yeah.
It seems like silly money for what they just hacked. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they did bring everything back online relatively quickly, even though people queued up in Virginia and Maryland and some other places to get gas. Ultimately, it wasn't really necessary.
Yeah, the actual repercussions did not turn out to be that great, unless you were in the Southeast, where there wasn't quite a bunch of stories that were indicative of how dependent we are on like instant supply and all that. So, if you take that and extrapolate that out a little bit, you can see how devastating something like this can be, and it also makes you have to be a little bit suspicious of the safety measures in place. If these folks can hack something that's that vital to our infrastructure and all, obviously nobody's safe, right?
That's exactly right. So with that in mind, joining us today is John Leitch, CEO of Winquest Cybersecurity. And hello, John.
Hello, Lauren. Hello, Patrick. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely.
All right. We're really excited to have you here, John. We know you have a lot of expertise in this area. But before you go into that, I'm going to remove myself from the conversation. I'm going to join you guys at the end of the podcast, and we'll wrap it up. And between now and then, we'll look forward to hearing everything you have to share.
Okay. So, John, before we get going on all of this cybersecurity stuff, just give us a little background about you and your mission with Winquest Cybersecurity Services.
Right. So Winquest Cybersecurity Services is a professional services firm serving commercial clients by providing cybersecurity services such as vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, incident response, training, and consulting. We've been doing that since March of 2013, and we become our clients' trusted advisor as we perform our services. And really, our clientele is widely varied, from two-person investment advisor firms all the way up to $6 billion manufacturer retailers. But our goal is to provide affordable cybersecurity services for all businesses.
And I've had the fortune of getting to know you over time here, and actually working with Winquest, and I know that the Winquest brand is unique and interesting to me, because I know you come from a military background, your partner comes from a military background, and your tagline is military grade cybersecurity, right? And what's interesting to me is you don't just approach this from a business standpoint, you approach this from a mission critical standpoint, and you're approaching it the same way the military might approach a critical operation. So talk a little bit about the formation of the company and the background on that brand.
Right. So the military grade is very important to us. And again, the founders all have military experience, and many of our employees do as well. The most important thing to understand is we consider our mission to provide cybersecurity services to businesses as basically a continuation of our military service. There's a threat to our nation out there in the form of nation states and cyber criminal gangs, and they're all targeting our businesses. And we believe that we need to help defend our businesses, just like we helped defend our nation when we were in the military.
Which makes sense, and there's a greater calling there, right? So let's get real specific now, and let's talk about ransomware. I know when I first started talking to you about what coming on the show and what we might talk about, you very quickly honed in on we should talk about ransomware. That is the big issue right now, and I'd like you to give us a little definition around ransomware. How does it work? What does it mean? But relate it to small business, because I know a lot of small businesses tend to not think that this will affect them.
Right. So imagine you're a small business owner, and you come in the morning and you turn your computer on and you get a message that says, we've got your files encrypted. You can't do anything unless you pay us 1 Bitcoin or 0.5 Bitcoin or whatever the case may be. It's usually some sort of cryptocurrency, almost always Bitcoin. And if you don't have a backup plan, you have two choices. You either pay the ransom or you go out of business, because that data is gone. You're never going to get it back. And if you needed it to run your business, you're done. And it happens so very quickly, so very easily. One click on the wrong link or the wrong attachment, and the malware downloads to your system, and they've got you. It's very profitable for the criminals too. They do research on their targets in most cases to know what you can afford. And the ransom is usually, reasonable from a business owner's perspective, because, if I pay $500 in Bitcoin or $1,000 in Bitcoin, or one of our clients after the fact, $10,000 in Bitcoin, to them, that was far cheaper than trying to rebuild their system from data that they didn't have anymore.
Okay. So it's kind of interesting, because there's a bunch of data out there on this. And the data confirms that most small business owners don't actually have a response if they're a victim of ransomware or cybercrime. And a few statistics here. According to the National Small Business Association, the average attack cost the business about $9,000. Roughly 83% of business owners don't have a contingency plan for dealing with this type of security threat, and only 42% spent any type of money at all on cybersecurity protections in the last year.
Yeah, woefully inadequate. And the bottom line is $9,000 of those who actually reported it.
Yeah.
So most of the businesses, unless they're required to, are not going to report it. And unfortunately, there's a large segment of businesses that are not being represented in those statistics, and those are the ones that never recovered and died and went out of business because they couldn't afford the ransom, or they didn't get their data back, or it was just too disruptive. Part of that $9,000 cost is not only the Bitcoin cost that you would pay, for example. Mm-hmm. It's the time to actually, okay, if you don't know what Bitcoin is, you've got a problem. Real quick example, we had it was a client called us up and became a client to help them with an incident response. It was $10,000 ransom. They'd heard about Bitcoin, no idea how to take care of it. We helped them actually walk through how to get a hardware wallet, how to buy the Bitcoin, how to send it to them, because they decided to pay the ransom. And again, it's not our business. We advise, we recommend, but they make the ultimate decision for their business. In this case, they had to pay. So we helped them take care of all that. They sent the ransom. They were very fortunate to get their data back, but then they had to rebuild their systems because they had a huge security flaw. So they've paid money. They're down operationally. They're burning, hours and hours and hours of employee time. And the $9,000 that's cheap. That's cheap.
Yeah, that sounded low to me when I saw that, but I'm also guessing that it probably includes folks who just elected to just not do anything, shut down and be done. It says here that the cost of cyber crimes in 2018 was $2.7 billion. That's according to the FBI's Internet Crime Report. It's only increasing though. I mean, it's just going up and up and up as we become more and more dependent on living digitally, basically.
Right. And again, businesses aren't taking this seriously in general. We run into this all the time. And if you're a cyber criminal, these are good times because you've got all these businesses that are out there. They're woefully ill prepared. And I'll speculate that a vast majority of them pay the ransom because it's easier to pay the ransom than to go through all the hassle of trying to rebuild your system if you can. So the criminals are smart. They do research and they know what you can afford, what you can't. The last figure I heard on the Colonial was actually from Colonial itself was $4 million ransom that they paid. And again, they felt they had to pay it. Granted, the FBI discourages us from paying the ransom, but in the end, business owners have to make the call of, do I not pay the ransom, go out of business, or do I hopefully learn a lesson and this never happens to me again?
So I'm a small business owner and I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. Where do we begin? What should the small business owner do right out of the gate here to take this situation on?
Well, the good news is these are low cost, high value things that a business owner can do. And the first thing that business owner needs to do is to back up their data. This can be an external drive. It can be even a thumb drive with just the most critical data. But the bottom line is that data needs to be backed up. And ideally, you would have 2 backups, a daily and even a weekly. And your backups should be kept off-site because this is part of your disaster recovery for not only ransomware, but also for potential fire, flood, hurricane, whatever that damages the building or the location of your backups. And that's really the number one thing. The second thing you can do is also low cost, high value, and that's train your employees to be suspicious of emails and attachments and links that they're not 100% sure who sent those. I got a whole folder full of phishing emails, which are very similar. And, they want you to log in because your password's expired or your account's been suspended. I got one this morning that said, oh, your invoice has been paid. Click here to see who it was that paid you. Well, no, sorry. I'll look at the bank if I want to see, invoices that were paid, or I'll go to a link of my vendors. But they're very clever. And all it takes is one click and you're done. So training your employees is the second thing that you can do to be very suspicious.
Okay. So I know you've had the opportunity to work with folks who have, had this happen to them. And I know you've got a few good stories, warning stories for us there. Any one particular come to mind?
Well, I'll just do a quick comparison. The client that we gained as a result of the incident response, they had no idea. They'd heard of Bitcoin in the news. They had no idea. Now, we discussed this a little bit before of the things we did to help them, but it took them a long, long time. I think the total time was over a week because they had a hard time. It's just difficult to just go out and buy cryptocurrency if you don't know what you're doing. Now, just as a sidebar, for them, it was very fortunate. There was a huge snowstorm that basically shut everything down. So their trucks couldn't have rolled anyway. And so it was a blessing for them that the ransomware hit when it did, because quite frankly, nobody saw any service disruption. Had it happened in the middle of one of their loading times, it would have shut down their entire distribution system. So they learned some lessons. Let's contrast that to, that's a big firm, $6 billion firm. that actually had an information security manager. Every year they practiced a disaster recovery drill, and they would literally say, okay, shut down the main server, just shut it off. And they would power down their main server, and they would have to move to a backup location. And they had Pelican cases with all of their original applications, all their original software, all of their backups. They actually had backups that were kept offsite as well. There's no doubt in my mind, had that firm suffered from a ransomware attack, they'd have told the criminals, no, thank you, go away. Would have taken down their system, rebuilt it, would have been back up. And their goal, and I actually saw this happen, it was extremely impressive, within 24 hours. This is a $6 billion company that you've probably eaten some of their products and they're in your freezer right now. Very impressive.
So that sounds a bit daunting, though, as a small business owner. I mean, Pelican cases and all this other stuff. I don't think it has to be that complicated for the small business owner.
Nope. Yeah. It could be a thumb drive. It could be a briefing, to my employees, and having a written plan, and then actually rehearsing it. We walk in the morning, and I say, okay, hands off the computers because we just got hit with ransomware. What do we do? And then after people, kind of done freaking out a little bit about what, you walk through, okay, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that. And I'm trying to make a decision beforehand whether I want to pay the ransom or not, right? Again, it's up to the individual business owner to do what's best for them. But if you have a written plan, you've got your data backed up, and unfortunately somebody clicked on something, you got ransomware anyway, well, okay, you've rehearsed your plan. And instead of having a Pelican case full, you've got maybe a drawer that you have your disks in with all your applications on it, or you go to the cloud. But we help our clients deal with that if it happens. But we're also there to try and make sure that we're helping them so that doesn't happen by consulting and telling them, here's specifically what you can do to back up your data, and train your folks and be ready for it when it happens. That's really the most important thing.
So is it true that, employees interacting with their email is the leading cause of ransomware? Well,
absolutely. That's the easiest way for the criminals to get into your system. And look, the bottom line is some of the most prestigious cybersecurity firms in the world have actually fallen and clicked on links and been infected with malware and given up some pretty damaging information. So it can happen to everybody, even security professional firms.
Okay. So for those of you out there who would like more information, SBA brings in partners and they host in-person and virtual events regularly around cybersecurity. The National Cybersecurity Alliance, a public-private partnership, also provides virtual and in-person cybersecurity events to help small business owners stay secure. And John, I know that Winquest Cybersecurity Division also reaches out to both, I think, managed service providers to educate them and small business owners.
Absolutely.
Yep. This was fascinating to listen to, John. And I guess if I had just one takeaway for small businesses listening, it sounds like you start with education of your employees and backing up your data regularly. Did I catch two important things that they could do starting today?
That's it. I mean, really, and those are, like I said, you don't need a Pelican case. You don't need a whole team. You just need an external drive of some type, and training your employees. Be suspicious. The criminals are good. They're very, very good.
Well, thank you, John, very much. And thank you all for watching another edition of our Reigniting Small Business podcast. I hope you'll take away some of these tips and arm yourself against ransomware and other cybersecurity threats. We will see you again next week on Reigniting Small Business.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again.